Welcome back, and we are moving into our second conversation for today. We're focusing on the upcoming, starting today actually, Annual Women in Fisheries Forum. And we have with us on set Nidia Chacon, who is the Senior Technical Officer at the MCCAP Fisheries, and that's the Marine Conservation Climate Adaptation Program. And we have Ralna Lewis, who is the Assistant Country Director for Wildlife Conservation Society. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
And welcome. And it is officially Fisher Folk Month. Yes. We spoke about that earlier, and this is one of the highlighted events in the commemoration of this month. Ralna, tell us why it was necessary to have a women's only, Kevin, women's only forum, digest it for a second, in Fisheries Month.
Okay, so last year we held the first Women in Fisheries Forum, and it was a great success, we believe. As a result of that forum, we were able to come up with a gender action plan, which looked specifically at key items that we wanted to address, such as decent work, social development in terms of disaster risk management for climate change, as well as information and research. So as a result of that, now we're holding our second forum, which looks at mainstreaming gender in the context of those specific items. And when we're talking about mainstreaming gender, we're looking at, what policies are in place that have an impact in terms of women and men. For the context of this voluntary guidelines, when we talk about gender, we're specifically talking about women and men. Mm-hmm. So just to backtrack a little bit, we have what we call the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of poverty eradication and food security. Now, this is the first international agreement which looks specifically at the social and economic aspects of fisheries governance. Mm-hmm. So, as a result of that, we're looking at how we can basically integrate, or like we say, mainstream gender when it comes to those particular aspects of Belize's fisheries sector.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious though, like, give me an example of where, I mean, I could understand in these circumstances where, because it's perception is a male-dominated industry.
Yes.
Could you talk to us about some of the things that we would not take for granted, or that we would take for granted to say, that wouldn't affect gender at all?
Exactly. So the thing is, when people think about the fisheries sector, they only think about fishing, going out and fish, right? So as a result of that, the emphasis is on the male, because the male basically dominates that aspect of the fisheries sector. Realistically, we only have about 3% of registered fishers being females, and they're predominantly from the southern areas of Belize. But when you look at the entire fisheries sector, we're talking about post-harvest, which is getting ready to go to fish, whether it's buying the groceries, getting your whatever, your books in order, and then you look at the harvest component of it, which is the fishing, and then you have the post-harvest component, which is the processing, the selling, whatever it is. When you look along the entire sector, along that entire value chain, then you see that there's several actors in place, not only the males. Mm-hmm. The females have a big role to play when it comes to the post-harvest part, whether it's getting your husband ready to go to fish. When it comes to the post-harvest, then it comes to processing, working in the fish, the cooperatives, the vendors, when you go to the conch shell bay, those persons selling, scalers as well. So then when you look at that aspect, because when you buy that product,
more sense, yeah.
It's not only the fish, it's not only that fishing, the price of that product is determined by all of these other components of the sector, right? Yeah. So then as a result of that, you see the role that women play. Now, globally we say women make up about 50% of the workforce in the fisheries sector.
Wow.
Most of that is in the processing, the post-harvest component of it. Now, what we want to do is to look at, when it comes to the women component of the fisheries sector in Belize, what issues are there that we need to address? Is there a gap in terms of their access to information, to their role in the decision-making process when it comes to policies? So that is the purpose of this forum.
Well, I was going to ask that question because it seems to me, and you're two females here on set with technical positions, is it that perhaps women are also heavily involved in the policy-making portion in Belize?
Well, when it comes to the policy part, that plays a lot in terms of your decision makers, you know, your ministers and so on. We have a fisheries administrator who is a female, who is involved in that process. But a lot of those policies...
What's her name?
Miss Beverly Wade. So a lot of those policies, however, are international. Those come, and then as a result of that, our local governments have to see how best to implement them, right? So, you know, that is where we're looking at how women can be more involved in that aspect of it. Ensuring, for example, you know, when they have the early closure of the conch season, how are you involved in that decision? How did they come up with decision, and did you have an input in that in determining that the conch season is closing early, and how will that impact you? So those are several things that we're looking at.
Isn't that a scientific decision?
Yes, it is. It is a scientific decision based on assessments that they do, then they can determine that. But then again, we need to look at what impact is that having. It could be a good impact because it ensures that the fisheries, that the conch fishery, we can have an opening the following year as well. But we just want to see how is that information being relayed, and what role do you have in that deciding those, you know, in those decisions.
So share a bit with us what that first experience was like last year. If I reflect on, you know, I once did a visit to the Northern Co-op, and it was a lot of women that was doing the processing in the plant itself. Tell us about some of the experiences that they shared with you at the last forum that were particularly unique, that you weren't expecting to come out of it.
So some of the concerns, I think, were in relation to safety at work and these processing plants. So that was one of big concerns that the women share, as well as the wage that they're receiving at these processing plants. So one of the interesting aspects for this forum for today is that we're having persons from the Labor Department as well as Social Security, you know, giving presentations and having booths in place so that the women can go and ask questions. Maybe they might not feel comfortable asking in an open area, but then, you know, go up personally and ask those questions, because there are some of the concerns that we have, and there are international agreements which put in place certain measures for these processing plants and so on. So we want to ensure that women are aware of these, as well as to see how they can advocate, or even as, you know, the role that we play to see how we could advocate to ensure that these things are in place.
So are you saying that there's a different pay if I work at a processing plant and I am a man as compared to if I were a female, and that the safety standards are different if I were a man than were a female?
The safety standards aren't different. It's just that in some instances it's not being practiced.
Give me an example. Give me a particular example.
So some of the gears that they would need to wear, some of them aren't wearing it, right? And when it comes to the wage component, it's mostly females who are involved in that processing part in terms of cleaning, packaging, and so on. And with that comes a certain wage that they receive. So then now it's up to them and the Labor Department to determine, you know, how best to address those particular issues.
But I don't want to stick on it, but I understand that it is affecting them, that they're affecting the females working there. But I'm trying to understand if it would work differently. Let's say you have 20 females and you have one man. Would his pay be different?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, so gender would not be a factor in that case.
No.
It's not an age gap, I think. I mean, it's not a wage gap.
It's the type of work that's determining the wage that they're receiving, and it just so happens that women are the ones who occupy that particular job. So it's now looking at how you could increase the wage for that particular job.
Whether it's a male or a female.
Whether it's male or female. When we're talking about gender mainstream, it's about male and females that we're looking at.
So, Nidia, tell us about your experience working within, you're a fisher folk, and I think, you know, one of the things, Ralna, that really stuck with me from our last conversation is just the classification of the month and recognizing just how many other persons are involved in the sector opened my eyes to the level of exposure that women do have in this industry. So, Nidia, tell us about your own experience.
Well, good morning, and what I'm here to talk about is about our MCCAP project, which is, as you correctly define it, Marine Conservation Climate Adaptation Project, 5-year project under the Fisheries Department, which has 3 different components. One, looking at the protection of the marine ecosystems. That includes expansion of replenishment zones and coral restoration. And the second component is alternative livelihoods. So we are looking to transitioning affected users of 3 priority marine protected areas, which are Corzal Bay Wildlife Sanctuary, Turnef Atoll Marine Reserve, and Saltwater Key Marine Reserve. And the third component talks about awareness on climate change. So we're working with 12 communities, fishing communities that happen to be users of these 3 marine protected areas. So what I am gauging in this morning is on making focus on component 2, which talks about alternative livelihoods. So you would say, okay, so what are we doing? Are we asking fishers to stop fishing? Not necessarily. We are targeting the communities. Necessarily, we're saying the household fishing communities by providing them a skills training. So in this day, we notice also that fishers will always fish. That is what they love to do. So we're targeting their wives and their children. So this was done by going into the communities. So we went from Consejo to Sarteneja, Copperbank, Shonosh, coming all the way, including Corzal Town, Belize City, Dangriga, Hopkins. We come down to St. Bite, Riversdale, St. Bite, Placencia. That's the 12 communities we're targeting. And we ask them, what would you like to learn that will provide you a supplementary income that will assist in your family? So based on that list, we were able to approach vocational institutions in Belize, which would be IT Vet. So we already graduated a total of 60 participants from the northern communities. On food preparation, there was also hospitality component. There was a cosmetology program. There was a computer repairs, servicing, and electrical installation. And out of that group, 58% total out of the 60, when I say percentage out of the 60, were women. And this shows us that women are not only caregivers, but they are also willing to learn a skill so that they can assist in their family.
How does this fit into climate adaptation? How does the wife of a fisherman becoming a hairdresser fit into adapting to the climate?
Well, you see, when we say climate adaptation, we are meaning that we need the fishers to understand that coming in the next 15 to 20 years, they are not going to be fishing the same amount that they are fishing right now. The fisher product will be affected because of climate change. Now, what will that happen if there is no supplementary income? It means that they are going to, yes, they are going to continue straining what there is, and also if they are not prepared, on what will they live off? So by targeting the household, we are preparing these communities to look at another alternative. And apart from that, we also have the fishers involved in sub-projects. So we're also doing sub-project grants. And right now we have involved Shonosh Fishers Association who are interested in agriculture, and they're looking into covered structure. We're also having involved fishers in the seaweed production. We also have deep slope project coming up on board. We all of these
fallback jobs for either off season or when, God forbid, we have challenges in being able to retrieve the same amount of fish stock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And do they understand? The buy-in from fisher folks, I should say, in being able to have sustainable practices. When I speak to you, it seems that it's there, but yet we're still facing a problem with changes within the stocks. What would you say is some of the weaknesses that you've identified? Whether it's with the women, maybe the women don't buy in and still want the fishermen to go out and fish to bring back some money, bring back products to make some money. Is that where we're finding some of the challenges?
The challenges in terms of adopting some of these responsible.
I'm saying some people buy in wholeheartedly, but there's some who still don't. It's like gill nets, for example. Some people already understand the ban, and some people are still adamant that they need to use it. Where are we finding the challenges, the people we're trying to target now?
I think it comes down to an issue of livelihood, of making money, right? your ability to earn an income to basically provide for your family, provide for yourself. So I think that's one of the interesting ways in terms of the approach that MCAP is using, you know, looking at that supplementary livelihood, not necessarily removing the fishers off the sea, but trying to ensure that the income of the household increases, so your dependency then decreases on that, you know, going out and fishing. So I think that's a very interesting aspect that they're using. I mean, it just comes down to livelihood, being able to provide for a family. That's something that's very important for people, right?
And it also shows, once again, which is the theme for your conference today, just how involved women are in the household of a fisher.
Exactly.
And they can be the provider, again, as I said, off-season or even when things slow down.
You know, oftentimes it's easy for people to come up with these policies, for these measures, you know, but you need to think about the rippling effects it have. If you have, for example, that gillnet issue, right? If you have a ban on gillnet, you know that a lot of households are actually the ones that are consuming fish that are caught by gillnets. You know, households are the one, not necessarily the restaurants and so on. So that has an impact, even though you're banning fishers from doing it. How about the persons who are purchasing that food for nutritional value? What impact will that have then? So when you have these issues, you need to look at the economic, yes, the conservation component, but also that social aspect of it, so that we can address these issues holistically, ensuring that, you know, people to the best degree that they're not negatively affected. Obviously, we need to have conservation measures in place, though.
This is the second forum. Could you talk to us about the progress that you're seeing from last conference to what you expect to see this year, and ideally, where would you want to see? What result would you like to see? Ideally, in a perfect world, after 5 years of doing this, yes, we've done it perfectly and we've achieved this. What are the improvements, one? And two, where do you see this ideally going?
Well, I have to say that the women are very interested in attending the forum. That's the first thing. We have the interest, the buy-in from them, which is very important for us. And this year, what we're seeing is that we're actually having the fisher women leading these presentations and discussions, which was different from last year, which was more focused on the NGOs coming and presenting and saying the work that they're doing. But the women are now speaking up in terms of what does the Fisheries Department have in place that is addressing their needs? How are the NGOs helping to address their needs as well? And looking at how they're working with their partners, you know, in providing that product that we all like. So that's a definite improvement that we're seeing this year. And what we would ideally like to see is that, you know, that the women become empowered. You know, one of the main things that we see is that for a lot of these fisher associations and cooperatives, it's the men that are leading them. And as a result of that, it's the men who have access to the information, and who has access to the information has the power. So what we want to see is that women take up some of those roles, becoming actively involved in fisher associations or cooperatives. Because one of the main things we need to look at is that these associations, these managed access committees, these are the ones that are determining who is having access to those prime fishing areas, right? So we want to ensure that women are on these committees, you know, so that they can, exactly, for that balance, and to ensure that women continue fishing, right? This is a part of our culture that we want to see continue.
And this morning in the forum, we have Miss Marva who will be present. She is a fisher lady in Lemonal Village, and I will be interviewing her so that she can speak out to the group that being a fisher person, normally we categorize men as the fishers, but women can also do fishing, and that they can see that it's something that in her community is being accepted. Because as Ralna mentioned, in the south of the country is where we find the most concentration of females being involved in fishing. Up in the north, it's not so bright as we would hope, but it is because of the way they fish. You know, up north.
I was gonna ask,
yes, up
and
north.
it's also calmer in the south, isn't it? In some areas where they fish. Well, are there other reasons why you think that people fish more in the south than in other parts of the country?
Like what she's saying, they're day fishers, so you go out for the day, you come back. Some of them camp, whereas for your sailboats, you basically stay on those sailboats for that week period. And I think it has a lot to do with the families. It's the social dynamics, right? Whereas in the south, it's the entire family sometimes that is involved in the fishing, right? the husband, the wife, the daughters, everybody would go out and fish and so on. Whereas up north, it's different. It's the males who go out on these voyages for this week-long period. Sometimes they'll bring their son and so on. So it's a different, social aspect to it.
Marlene will want me to ask this question, which is that, ideally you're looking at getting the entire industry better. What is the benefit of taking the approach of focusing on women and getting the spill over to the men and ultimately to the entire industry?
Well, what we do recognize is that...
But you just answered yourself.
What we do recognize is this. In many aspects, women are very organized. And it's easy for us to get them involved.
Man, say that to me, I say sexist.
It's easy for us to get them involved in some of these activities and initiatives that we're leading.
Yeah.
And also, when we have the women involved, we notice that we have, to some degree, greater accountability in terms of how the monies are being, the books are kept, and ensuring that the money basically goes back into the household and is used for the household itself. So, those are some of the reasons why we're really looking at women and seeing how they can help to organize the fisheries sector, ensuring that, the fishermen, everyone involved in the fisheries sector can receive that benefit that we're saying that, when you have these conservation things in place and the policies in place, you should get these benefits. So as a result of that, we want to bring the women into this whole discussion, because we recognize the benefits that it would have for having women involved in this discussion.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a very interesting day lined up today. Who all have been invited to participate?
We have on board, of course, Fisher Ladies, representing from Alois Serteneja to Punta Gorda. Yeah. We also have involved the Women's Group, Labor Department, Social Security, and we also have the NGO organizations such as WCS, President Fisheries Department, Southern Environmental Association, which is C, managing down in Placencia. So we have an array of these women representing, and we are going to be bigging them up today, right, Ralna?
Yes.
Empowering them with all of this information, and the most important thing that they are being involved, because like Ralna mentioned, they are going to be presenting some of the information that they had with an exchange program that we had last year in Merida, the GCFI conference, where we had these ladies, Fisher Ladies, representing and going there and learning about progressive fishers in that part of Yucatan, and they're presenting what they learned and their experience to all of the group today. So that is what we are going to be having as a highlight.
All right. And of course, we will continue with Fisher Folk Month. Is there any other activity coming up soon that people need to be aware of?
Yes. Yes.
Excuse me?
So tomorrow we have the blessing of the boat. So that will be happening out at National Cooperatives. So we ask all the fishers to come out to receive their blessing before the opening of lobster season, which is the 15th of June, right?
Then you won't find them.
Exactly.
They're all gone.
Yep. And then we have the call for Fisher of the Year Award. This is something that we've been having for 4 years. So again, you can send in your nominations to Wildlife Conservation Society or the Fisheries Department for that outstanding fisher, which you think should get recognized.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in and telling us all about your upcoming forum today, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to representatives from the Belize Zoo about World Crocodile Day. So stay tuned.
And a surprise guest?
Yes.